Good morning, everyone. I hope you all have been having a fantastic week. Welcome to episode 5 of the Enablement Brew. I'm Carly Laner.
And I'm Malvina Alsayak, and we are so excited you're joining us for yet another episode. Carly, what are we talking about today?
We are talking content management.
Yes.
It's a big topic in enablement. Should you be involved in content? Should you not be involved?
I know. That's a good topic to talk about because there's so much to uncover there. But before we get started, ta-da!
Nice. I'm tea today.
I'm coffee. I'm always coffee. You're team tea.
I know. Well, yeah. I'm on my second cup of tea, third cup of caffeine, and it's 10 a.m.
The real question is, do you put milk in your tea?
It depends on my mood. I will drink it black. Same with coffee.
Mm.
But I have this Earl Grey cream tea that I really like. And so, yeah, but if I'm having a cup of like Yorkshire tea, like I put some milk and sugar in it.
See, it's interesting. So I'm originally Polish, and in Poland, we drink tea with lemon and sugar. We never put milk in tea, which actually, when you put milk in tea, people look at you very funny. But living in London, I have embraced putting milk in my tea. I do love it, but it is not the accepted standard in other countries.
Yeah, I like putting lemon. I prefer lemon in like even my Yorkshire tea, even Earl Grey, just like put some lemon in it. But like I've asked for that. Yeah. People look at me like I'm crazy. Like, okay, yeah, milk and sugar is fine.
Awesome. All right. So content. I think with content, when we look specifically at different sales enablement solutions out there, and there are plenty big ones, lots of smaller ones, content is usually the number one challenge for a lot of scale-ups, purely because it can be stored anywhere, right? You can have things on Google Drive, you can have them the PowerPoints and the docs. And unless you know that something exists, you can't
find it. Yeah.
Right? Or unless someone shares something with you, you didn't even know, it existed and it was a thing. And I think for lots of scale-ups that are growing, actually organizing content and making sure people have a dedicated place where they can access everything, you're able to build and continue growing, but it's not chaotic. It is organized. And from the perspective of a salesperson, to be able to quickly locate content, I think is extremely important.
Yeah. So I've implemented an enablement platform, same platform. I'm a Showpad customer, at 2 different organizations. And I'm the same person, 2 different organizations, same platform, wildly different results.
Interesting.
And there's some approaches I took differently with the Andela implementation that I would recommend all enablement leaders take, and we can talk about that. But it is very possible that organizations might not be fully ready for an enablement platform or might not fully understand like the purpose of it. So I think before you go and say like, okay, yes, we need to buy a Showpad, a Highspot, a Seismic, Big Tin Can, like we could throw all of them out there. You really need to do your due diligence internally and sell the concept, not only to sales leaders, but also you need marketing's buy-in as well. And also someone to manage it is like another big thing. But the biggest difference I saw in implementing the 2 platforms was our sales leadership was fully bought in here at Andela, and like people could take or leave it at my previous company. And so there was really no one to champion the platform outside of enablement. And so when, I'm trying to make that platform successful, I was like the evil person, not allowing them to do things that sales wanted to do. But it's like, but we're doing it to get value out of the platform.
Yeah.
And so Otherwise, it's just a glorified Google Drive or glorified Dropbox or whatever you use to store content. If you're not getting the data and the value out of it, because that's really what those platforms are there for, in my opinion.
I would love to have your thoughts on when you think someone is ready for an enablement solution, because I think if you come from an environment where you are used to having everything organized, right, all your content in the right place, sellers know where to go to access content, how they can share it out with customers, with prospects. They can then see if that content was looked at. We can get stats as to, is it working? Are people looking at it? You know, we're spending 3 hours working on proposals. Are customers actually reading it? And ideally, we would all love to have that, right? But you mentioned there is a point where you have to ask yourself is, are they ready for it?
Yeah.
Is now the right time? Do you have any tips around when is that right time?
Well, I think it depends on how much content you have. So Andela, we actually didn't have a ton of content when I joined the company. You know, we had, a couple pitch decks for each team, a handful of case studies, but we had a content team who was ramping up production of content and trying to release new content fairly consistently. So it obviously made a lot of sense, especially after speaking with salespeople. They're like, I just use these 2 case studies because they're on my desktop and I don't know where anything else is stored. And so what would happen is marketing would upload an ebook to Slack and like, heaven forbid, like Slack is like the worst place to put something.
Mm-hmm.
A message will get lost in the Slack channel in about 5 minutes. And so that was happening with our marketing content. I'm going to pause.
Holly, you come in? Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So that was happening with our marketing content. So at that point, I kind of realized we're starting to build out more content. Content is a focus for our marketing team. And sales wants to use it. And they have identified themselves that it is a challenge to find content. So for me, that was a super easy sell when I introduced Showpad, because I was like, you guys are looking all over Slack for content. And that's only if you know it exists, like you said earlier. So here's this amazing tool that is housing everything for you. And if you don't know if something exists, you can use this filtering mechanism that Showpad has, which is really cool, that will show content to you that might fit the criteria that you're looking for, that you didn't even know existed. And so that to them was really exciting, but then they basically didn't have a choice in sharing through the platform. So if they really wanted to share the latest case study, I disabled downloads off of the platform for PDF documents. Like, there's no reason you need to download this. You just need to include the link in your email.
You just need to know where it is.
You just need to know where it is, and you just share through Showpad, and that's literally all you need to do. And no one got upset by that decision that I made. And sharing is through the roof. Our top salesperson is our top sharer, which is like the best.
That's incredible
for enablement, right?
That's correlation.
Like, look, top seller, top sharer. There's shouldn't be a surprise, right? So for me, it just happened to be a really good time at Andela because, like I said, we were focusing on content, and sales was like, this is a pain point for us. This is super painful for us to find content. Enter an enablement platform. What didn't go well with my previous role was there were so many decks out there. People would create their own decks for every meeting, and they'd basically be starting from scratch over and over. And they did not want to share using an enablement platform. They felt that their client base wouldn't respond well to a link versus an attachment. They didn't care about the stats. I was like, what year am I in? Is this 1995? Like the London team printed out PowerPoints and brought them to their meetings. I was like, I'm not in the 21st century. Like, this is unbelievable to me. But
you get their buy-in.
The London team, I did get their buy-in. And what I did was I got them iPads. So we had some iPads in the office. And so people would come check out an iPad, and I showed them how to use content on an iPad in a meeting versus printing stuff out. Yeah. And our clients responded really well. So that they were like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah. And one of our value propositions at my previous company was, we are changing the way the legal industry works. And I always said, we can't have that mission and show up with printed PowerPoints. Yeah. Like, we can't say we are revolutionizing the legal industry and bringing it into the 21st century when we show up with printed PowerPoints. Like, that does not compute. And so things like that, it really help like level up and modernize your sales team. So I don't know how it's doing today, but it was a big challenge, but we just didn't have the buy-in from the beginning. Yeah. So that's like my big lesson learned around the enablement platforms.
Yeah. Having the buy-in is important. And maybe if you don't necessarily have that buy-in, like to your point, that iPad was really revolutionary. People saw that you can do things in a slightly different way. I think what we spoke about in one of the first episodes that we recorded, right, was the fact that enablement is this bridge between sales and marketing. And if we look at content holistically, if you have a content marketer, if you have a product marketer, right, and they're producing all this great content, the last thing you want is for that content not to be used. Now, would I say it's necessarily a huge concern for enablement? I would say it's a bigger concern for marketing because they are producing all this content that isn't being looked at. But from an enablement perspective, if we're having conversations where maybe someone's deciding between one or two products, us and a competitor, maybe we're having conversations where someone really wants to see that case study, or we know that case study would help speed up the sales process. I think from an enablement perspective, we want our sellers to be able to use that content shared across and make it as easy as possible, because ultimately I care that they're hitting their targets, right? And if that piece of content is going to help them with that, obviously it has to be framed and talked about in the right way, then that's what I care about. But I think content is so broad and there's so many elements to it. Number one, you have to be able to access it, right? Number two, you have to know exactly where it lives. Number three, you have to be able to share it with your prospects and customers. And in an ideal world, when you're talking about content, you also want to know, is it being looked at, right? And that fourth element of is it being looked at is one that marketing cares about immensely.
Yeah. And to add on to that, it's also the revenue impact of content.
Yeah.
So ask any marketer, like that's the hardest part of creating content. They're like, yeah, I hope sales uses it. And like, I hope it's helpful, but I don't really know how much revenue this piece of content has influenced. We can't say that a piece of content is the reason we've brought in that revenue, but we can say it's marketing influenced. And so enablement being that bridge between sales and marketing, we can help marketing tell the story, the success stories and the failures of their content, and help them with the lessons learned. So I think that's a really important piece of it, is giving marketing the tools to be able to like champion what they're producing.
Yeah. Now it's interesting because you will probably meet other enablement leaders who will say that content, that's not us, right? We don't deal with content, and ultimately we're not responsible if that piece of content is actually influencing revenue or not. What are your thoughts on that?
It's super interesting. Like I I think I said this before, like, I don't want to produce the content. Like, I am by no means an expert in copywriting and, translating the messaging from marketing onto like a piece of like eye-catching, amazing content, right? So I don't want to necessarily produce it, but I will absolutely help enable it. And what does that mean? It's, hey, this case study is being released. We need to write like a summary of what this case study is about for sales. So it would be great if they read the whole thing, but chances are they probably won't. So, okay, what is this case study about? Who's the intended audience? Where is it located? It's on our enablement platform. Here's maybe a snippet to include in emails that if you want to share this case study, like here's some language to include in your email templates. But I don't want to produce it. Like I said, like I have no experience in that. Yes, I have a degree in marketing, but that was a decade ago, and social media wasn't even around when I graduated from university to the extent it is now. So like, I'm not the person for this. What do you think?
I think content is only as good as how we use it, because you can have the most amazing case study, but if you don't position it in the right way, if you don't talk about it in your meeting, if you don't bring it up and then you just attach it, that doesn't.
What's the point? Yeah,
that doesn't really do much. You're right. I'm also not a content writer, right? I can't probably write that case study or put together that piece of content, but it's about raising that awareness, right? So things that we are creating aren't just disappearing and into the thin air, right? And they're not being used. And I think that's where enablement comes in, to enable.
Totally.
That our sellers are aware of it. Last point that I think we had on our agenda for today: how do you know which content provider, content solution, content platform you should be using? Because we've talked about this earlier. Usually enablement is a one-man shop initially when you start off. And if you think about all the different priorities and things you're dealing with, to then roll out, implement, and manage continuously a platform, that's a big ask.
It's a big ask. So there, like I said, like there's some big providers out there. I recommend that you look at all of them. But I think they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And so you have to ask yourself, like, what problem are we trying to solve? And what do we really need out of this? Because, like Seismic has some really interesting functionality that Showpad doesn't. But if you don't need that functionality, then do you need to go with Seismic, for example? Or, Showpad has this really cool like experience builder. But if you're not going to leverage that, then like, don't get distracted by like the bells and whistles of some of these platforms, because it's really easy to, because they're doing some really cool things, but you also have to be honest with yourself if you as an enablement function are ready to leverage some of those things, to your point. So someone to manage it, whether it's half a head count or a full head count, depending on how much content you have, is going to be something that you need. Otherwise, it's going to be just as disorganized as a Google Drive or, a Dropbox folder before you know it. How have you typically approached this?
So I think if I know that I'm a one-man shop, I ask myself the question, can I truly take this on board? And one of the things that scares me in any demo is, Malvina, this is highly customizable, right? The minute I hear highly customizable, I am running off, right? Because that's like, what does that do to the person hearing that? It sets off all these alarm bells in my head.
That means
being highly customizable. That means it's going to take me a really long time. That means I'm going to have to hire a team of people to help me, and it's just going to be super complicated. Ultimately, you're right. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're trying to solve? And I want something that is going to be easy to use, because we need adoption, right? If we bring out something that has all the bells and whistles, but it's super complicated and no one is going to use it, then hey, that launch went badly.
Yeah.
It's a reflection on us.
Yeah. I think that's the question you have to ask yourself. What are we solving for here? How do sales interact with content today? How would we like them to interact with content? Are they creating like super complex, personalized proposals, or are they leveraging pretty like off the shelf content? Yeah. Those are like the types of questions you should ask yourself, and then evaluate the providers through that sort of lens.
And another important element for me, and I think we might have an episode coming up on this, it's technology chaos, right?
Oh God, yes.
But when we're growing, like someone has a great idea, we need this particular tool, and they'll bring that tool on board. Someone else has another idea and they'll bring that tool on board. And then before you know it, you have all these different tools that potentially don't speak to each other, and you have to manage each tool separately. I think with content, what I love and what I look for as well is that we have content and we have learning, and we can use the content and the learning, right? So if we're talking about onboarding, it's going to leverage some of those materials that we have in content. And in an ideal world, I would like to have these two solutions together, and loads of these big providers do that. But for me, that is a must. And I know there are smaller providers that do content and smaller providers that do learning, but I don't want to play with two separate providers for ultimately challenges that are really closely interlinked.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we could probably have a whole session on like what you should look for in a learning platform for sales. But funnily enough, a lot of these major enablement platforms are acquiring learning platforms to integrate into their content management like systems, essentially. So that is definitely the trend that the industry is going in, is combining platforms.
Love that. And absolutely, right? Like if you're doing onboarding, you're leveraging the case studies that marketing has put together.
Totally. Yeah. You should be looking at the pitch decks. You should be looking at the playbooks. Yeah. You should be looking at all of the content while also going through the learning that has been set up as well. So they definitely should ideally be in one platform.
Awesome. I think that's a wrap.
I think it is. Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us for episode 5, where we talk content management. Should enablement be involved? Do you buy a content management platform or a sales enablement platform? What should you consider? All of the fun things around content. So thank you guys for joining us.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks for episode 6. Bye.
Bye.